This power station, I earlier spoke to Gerson Rukata, NamPower's executive for generation. Also joining him was Tangeni Tshivute, project manager, biomass power project. Here follows that discussion. Well, Mr. Tshivute, Mr. Gerson, thank you so much for joining us today. First things first, of course, we do understand that the aim of the project is to address energy security, affordability, but just briefly, shed more light on how the project came about, what it entails, and the objective for NamPower.
The project, thank you very much. The project was a response to NamPower's integrated strategy and business plan. NamPower took a deliberate decision to go green, and this was in response to two main government policies. The first one says the renewable energy policy directs that at least 70% of our energy requirements should come from renewable sources. The second one that follows that endeavors to achieve 80% of our energy requirements from local sources. And with that, together with the government, ministerial determination came about. The Honorable Minister of Mines and Energy allocated the following project. It's a 250 megawatt project. Divided as follows. 70 megawatts was allocated to IPPs, 20 was solar PV, which is currently in construction, and 50 Serim in Luderitz area, Luderitz Wind, Serim Luderitz Wind, which is in development. And then 108, the remaining 180 was allocated to NamPower. Of that, 20 megawatts is Omburu PV, which was completed in April 2022. 50 megawatts is Anihas 2 HFO, which is currently under construction and due for completion 31 July 2024. And then 40 megawatts biomass, which was awarded recently in May 2024. It's a 30 months construction. It is to come about in Q1 2027. And then lastly, 70 megawatts Roshpina, which is currently being evaluated. We aim to award it 31 July this year. And then approximately 18 months construction, and it should come about first quarter 2026. And just to continue, Namibia has an abundance of renewable sources, right? Solar, wind, and biomass. However, it needs to be acknowledged that solar and wind are what we call intermittent. All it means is you will only get solar from energy from a solar plant when the sun is shining. And you will only get energy from a wind plant when wind is blowing. So we have to bring in something, and that's what we work on an energy mix at NamPower. So if you followed all those projects, they are aiming to achieve an energy mix. HFO is a plant that you can start anytime, but it's an emergency plant because it's expensive to run. The biomass is also a dispatchable plant. You can start and switch it off when you need it. So the dispatchable plant they are to follow your renewables. So that's really the aim of the mix, to achieve our strategy of 2020, 2025.
Mr. Tshivute, maybe just perhaps you can add, in addition to what he highlighted, is the aspect of renewable energy, and of course discussions, around clean energy has somehow taken center stage in the country. Of course, given, like he highlighted, the endowed, energy resources that we have in the country. But how viable is biomass compared to other energy sources?
Okay, so thank you for the question. This project has been in development as early as 2012. And this is one of the projects that went through a pre-feasibility, feasibility, and then finally the final development. So in terms of viability, in terms of the bush resource, we've done detailed studies to know that there is more than enough resource within Namibia. What we've also done studies of is the pricing in terms of the technology. The biomass technology is very competitive with our imported electricity, which means if we can have a project like this one, which uses indigenous resources and can compete at a price of the imported electricity, it really then helps us in terms of our own energy security and also sustainability.
And I mean, in terms of the, the bush and stuff, perhaps we do know that Namibia is affected by bush encroachment on a massive scale. We're talking about 9 regions out of 4, if I'm not mistaken, whereby 30% of the land is affected by bush encroachment. But why, has this specific area been chosen, number one, for this project? And perhaps also, how is this particular issue of bush encroachment created imbalance, within, the biodiversity? Mr. Tshivute.
So the plant is going to be situated in Tsumeb, and just a few kilometers outside of Tsumeb, which is actually one of the highest bush encroached areas in Namibia. So why Tsumeb was chosen? During the environmental impact assessment process, we visited several sites across Namibia, some in the Omaheke region, Khomas, Otjikoto, and finally, we used what we call a multi-criteria decision-making process, where you look at various factors. Your transmission infrastructure, how close is your transmission infrastructure to your potential sites? What is the bush resource like in that area? What would the social impacts in that specific area be? And several other factors. And what we found was that Tsumeb was ideally suited for the first plant, especially because of how close it was to the transmission infrastructure. The Tsumeb is close to a big hub, which takes electricity to the northern parts of Namibia, and then also towards the Zambezi and Kavango regions. So it's perfectly situated from our transmission network. And then if I maybe say further in terms of bush encroachment itself in that area, I think that was your follow-up question. We need to understand bush encroachment in the Namibian context. And the context in which we live is this bush is growing at a very fast rate. It's making it difficult for farmers to have productive agricultural land. And what we are finding is that our farmers are spending significant resources trying to combat bush encroachment. So what we are doing as NamPower is, presenting a solution that serves both the electricity sector and our agricultural sector by meeting our farmers halfway to create a revenue source for the farmers and also an electricity source for ourselves.
Right. Now, of course, and also the other question, when we look at the objectives of this particular project as well, is to stimulate the local economy in general and to promote a local biomass fuel supply chain in the country. To what extent, though, is this project of benefit to the entire country?
If I may start, and then Tangeni can come in. The resource is there. The main drive or secondary drive for this project was we needed to learn the biomass harvesting industry in the country. And the 4 suppliers that we have appointed, it's highly mechanized. They will be highly mechanized, and the idea is once we land and assure ourselves that the harvesting industry is working, the supply of wood chips are coming to the power plant. Simultaneously, we are also aiming to bring up the smaller suppliers, what we call the ad hoc suppliers, and we obtained 2 grant funds from Europe for that. And European institutions nowadays, they wouldn't give that if they did not believe that the project is doing good for the environment, for the country, and for employment.
I mean, biomass production as well is quite climate polluting. How are we going to navigate through that?
Yeah, so I think I want to say it's a little bit of a misconception.
Okay.
You know, why biomass is classified as renewable energy is, especially in the Namibian context, is this encroacher bush grows back at a very fast rate. So it's one of these things where I said earlier that our farmers are struggling with it because they spend a lot of resources in debushing, and in a few years' time, that bush will be back and potentially back with a vengeance.
Perhaps you can just give us more insight on how, you know, this whole process takes place, because is there some sort of burning fuels, you know, that goes into the process?
Okay,
That's
so basically, so thanks, maybe for more clarity, what will then happen is this bush will be burnt in a boiler, which is a highly efficient boiler, which obviously through that combustion process we create electricity, but then we also have mechanisms in place to reduce any harmful gases that might come out of the exhaust fumes. So this is the technology that is being used worldwide. We have mitigation measures in place, and that's why we've received an environmental clearance certificate, because the limit of pollution and the limit of the environmental impact with this plant. Yeah, so it is safe for our Tsumeb constituents. We have done our homework in terms of making sure that we have a good environmental impact, both on the harvesting and the savanna side, but also on the power station side itself.
Is this project in any way going to expand it to other, regions or other, towns in Namibia? And also, are there any perhaps employment creation during this project, and also long term?
Yeah, I can take it. So, as I said earlier, we've looked at, I think, about 5 or 6 other sites, and it is definitely the plan that once this project has proven itself and the full macro and microeconomic benefits are seen, that we can replicate this plant in other areas. And we did a study in 2021 from Cirrus Capital in terms of how much this plant can actually contribute to the economy. And what this plant will result is in NamPower spending close to 200 to 240 million Namibian dollars every year in sourcing wood chips. And what that does to an economy is obviously bring more money, bring more stimulus into that area, to the point where farmers can focus on other agricultural means, and also the various spin-off effects. The hotel and hospitality sector in Tsumeb, I'm sure during the construction period will be full. The lodges might have more guests, so that's, I mean, I'm talking indirect employment.
Just to add, when we started with this project, the main concern was, can the harvesting industry supply the wood chips at the rate and speed that would be required by the plant? So if you like, this plant is some sort of a prototype to prove the concept. And once the project is proven, either NamPower or private developers can put up the additional plants that at the 5 sites where we looked at.
Okay.
So that's, we needed to convince our stakeholders that this type of plant and the supply of wood chips, the concept can actually work. And become an industry that is self-driven, and we definitely sure that we're going to prove that with the 4 suppliers that we have appointed here.
I just want to maybe add to what Mr. Rukata said about the jobs. So the power station itself will have 62 permanent employees. These will be NamPower employees. During the construction period, it varies, but we predict at least 300 jobs. And through the harvesting and supply chain of the biomass, we expect that there should be close to 1,000 jobs that are created within that region. And these are what we call direct employment. The indirect employment, based on the fact of all of this economic opportunities for the project, that one we have not even counted that, which should be much more than the direct employment.
Great. So what is the lifespan of this particular project? And just in addition to the very first question that I asked you, perhaps you can just expand on how this project will create, energy security in the country and just make it easier for, the inhabitants.
The design life of the plant is 25 years, and of course it can go 30, 40 years. I think Van Eck now is 50 years. It's a similar technology to the Van Eck power station outside Windhoek. The follow-up question was
Energy security.
Yeah, how exactly will this, power plant or the power station create energy security in the country? Or contribute to it,
as I said, it's a dispatchable plant. It's what we call a baseload plant. It's a plant that you can start and switch off at any time you want. You don't have to wait for the sun or wind to come. And it displaces imports to provide you with the energy security that the country needs to drive the economy.
I can just maybe add to that. What's important to know is Namibia already has a very, renewable energy mix with Rukata, our hydro plant. We have several solar plants during the day, and we have a few wind projects that are currently in Namibia. But what we also see when we look at our energy mix is most of our imports are coming at night and during the low season. And the perfect thing about this plant is, one, it is operating 24 hours. And if you look at the seasonal flow of Rukata, we get our highest output from Rukata between, let's say, January and April, which is our rainy season. And from April to, let's say, December, it's our dry season when the output starts to come out. That April to December is the time when the harvesting activities for the biomass is at its peak, which means it will most likely that this plant will be operating at what we call baseload, 24 hours a day during the dry season when we actually need that energy the most. Yeah.
And for you to come up with more solar plants, come up with more wind plants, you need this type of plants to load follow our solars and the wind. You need a type of a biomass plant, you need a type of a gas plant. We're reading now that with the oil and gas finds that a lot of gas is coming. So those plants are not competing.
Yeah.
They are, if we want to develop more solars and more winds to export, these type of plants make that possible. Yeah?
So
they're not competing.
There's no competition, each, suitable for each sector. The policies in place, like you mentioned earlier, in support of renewable energy, to what extent can we really speed up implementation of renewable energy projects? Do these policies have elements that actually support speedy implementation?
Correct. My vision is Namibia implements mega solar plants, mega wind plants, but what you need is money. What you need is money. You need to develop these plants very well, that they entice the international development institutions, international banking institutions to come and say, Namibia, we can give you money, you can go and develop those plants. So
Just to
While,
add,
while you're adding that, perhaps you can also just address the question of, do we have enough, money? Like you highlighted, what we need is money. Do we have enough money for this, particular project? Do we have enough, human capital as well?
that's a very good question. So I'll start quickly on the money part. Yes, this project is fully funded. So it's being funded from the French Development Agency through debt funding. Then we also received 2 grants. One grant was from the Mitigation Action Facility for 25 million euros, which is roughly 500 million Namibian dollars, which is a climate and adaptation fund, which shows that the international community believe in the Namibian case study that we have. And then we also very grateful for the 400 million Namibian dollars that was given to us by the Namibian government, as they saw the high social impact that this project would have, both to the agricultural sector, the general sector in that constituency. And then lastly, we also received funding, about 3 million euros, which is roughly 60 million Namibian dollars, for capacity building and also spreading the social benefits of the project. So the project is fully funded. And to add maybe to what Mr. Rukata said about the policy support, I think the Namibian energy sector is well regulated. We've got very good policies which promote what we are trying to do, and this project, for example, falls under 2 policies.
Okay.
The Namibian Integrated Resource Plan, the Namibian Energy Plan, the Ministerial Determination, but also the Namibian, sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now, but the Strategy for Sustainable Bush Development, which was given to us by the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism. So the project definitely has the policy support and the governmental support. Yeah.
With that said, perhaps before we conclude, what are just some of the measures put in place to make sure that there is transparency and accountability, to ensure that in the end, this project is successfully completed?
Yeah, so I think, as I said earlier, Namibia is a very well-regulated country, especially the electricity sector. So, for example, all the procurement was done under the Procurement Act, which means there's plenty of rules to follow. We have an environmental management plan to make sure that we are always sticking to our environmental management impacts or promises. And then we have several international donors who've got quite strict guidelines in terms of how these projects are going to be developed. There's a lot of rules to follow, and I think NamPower, especially in recent history, have been successful in developing generation and transmission projects, and we plan to continue that process through this project.
Mr. Gerson?
Lastly, yeah, the 2 grants are extremely stringent. They've got processes and procedures on how you go about these things, checks and balances. Just FFEM, for example, one of the assistance that they've given is looking at gender mainstreaming, making sure that women benefit from this project, particularly on the harvesting side. The same as sand people, resettlement farms, and things like that, where policy allows. So it's very, there's a lot of strict checks and balances. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Gerson and Mr. Tshivute, thank you so much for your time and information today, and all the best with the project.
Thank you.